Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about how to spice up your songwriting using key changes or modulation. So I'm going to go over some basic concepts and then I'm going to walk you through one of my songs where I incorporated a few key changes just to give you an example of how to apply this yourself. So the basics are simple. You're just applying some kind of modulation or change of keys somewhere in your song. So for example, if you start in C, you might want to transition into G in the chorus or something like that, and then back to C as a simple example. So you might be wondering how do you determine what key to change to and when you should do it? So obviously it's up to you. It's a very artistic choice. So you can experiment and be creative here, but there are definitely some simple guidelines you can follow to kind of make things simpler. So you should know of the concept of a closely related key, which just means two keys or scales which are very close together in that they share a lot of the same notes. So for example, the scale C major is very closely related to G major because they only differ in one note between them. So if you transition from C to G, you're more likely to get a smooth transition that isn't as drastic to the listener. But of course, if you want to be drastic, if you want to have that effect, then you can pick a very unclosely related key for that effect. So there are a few different shortcuts you can use. For example, using the parallel and relative minors and majors. So for example, if you're in the key of C, you can go to the parallel minor, which is C minor, or the relative minor, which is A minor. And then you can go to very common intervals like the fourth and the fifth. So if you're in C, you can go to the F or the G. Very kind of broadly speaking, those are simple things you can start experimenting with right away. You can also follow kind of like a chain of modulation. So there's this concept of the dominant, which is the fifth in the scale. So for example, for the C, the dominant is the G. So it's very common to go from C to G. But you can also do like a subdominant, which is like it's the dominant of the dominant that you're gonna go into. So for example, if you're in C and you want to go to G, the dominant of G is a D. So you can effectively go to the D first and then to the G, and you can follow this kind of chain of fifths. In fact, that's why the circle of fifths is a very popular and very useful tool for key modulation. In fact, I can show you. So I have my iOS app Pensato here. So if you're interested in this app, it's kind of like a scale explorer. I'll put a link in the description so you can get it on iPhone and iPad. But I can pull up the circle of fifths on the app here, and you can see exactly what I was saying. So let's say your song is in C and you're starting in C, so we're at the top of the circle over there. So the simplest thing you can do is just find something that is very close, like a neighboring key. So in this case, you can go to G, which is the dominant or the perfect fifth around the counterclockwise or clockwise in this case, or you can go to the perfect fourth if you go counterclockwise. So in this case, F. Or you can go to the parallel minor, so the inner circle there, you can see that below the C is an A minor. So if you pick any of the ones that are kind of nearby on the circle, chances are it'll be like a very pleasing key transition. Then once you've identified which key you want to go into, you have to sort of figure out, it's almost like a puzzle, you have to figure out a way to smoothly transition from one key to the other. And Bach was like a master of this, where sometimes you don't even notice you're in a different key because the transition is so smooth and clean. The most obvious way to go into a key is to play its dominant chord first. So for example, if we're in C and we want to transition to the G, the thing we want to play to transition to the G is a D7, because the D7 wants to resolve to G because it's its dominant. But it would be very drastic to kind of go straight into the D. So maybe you can use a pivot chord. So in this case, like an A minor or something, which is shared between both keys. So you can start in C, go to the A minor, and then the D7. And then you're in G. And then to kind of really anchor the new key, you want to maybe stick to the root or keep playing the dominant and like the 5 and the 1 of the new key just to really emphasize it. But playing the D is enough because its third is the F sharp, which doesn't exist in C. So it's the note that is different between C major and G major. So as soon as you introduce that note, it makes it very clear that you're transitioning, especially if you've played the natural F beforehand in your melody. That's a very obvious, like, oh, something is different here. So again, this is a very artistic, creative choice. So depending on if you want something to be drastic and you want to get the the listener's attention, or if you want it to be more subtle, you'd have to find a more complex way to get around there. And if you want more examples of how to apply different key changes, definitely listen to Bach stuff, especially the keyboard works. And start off with the simple stuff like the two-part invention in C major. The first one is a very simple exercise to see how simple key changes work really nicely and elegantly. So I designed the Pensato app specifically for this kind of use case, to find two closely related keys and to easily kind of find ideas for transitioning keys. So let me show you a quick example if you use the app here. So for example, if I pick C major, we're going to add that scale in here. And then if you tap on this little galaxy button here, you can see that it shows you related scales. So the ones under common are the common ones you might want to consider. So for C major, you can see you have the parallel minor, which is C minor. Then you have the dominant G major at the bottom, the relative minor, A minor, and stuff like that. And then I have this tool here where you have this little keyboard at the bottom. So depending on what notes you select, it's going to show you all the scales in the catalog that fit those notes. So this is a good way to find closely related keys. So for example, if I show you these notes here, you can see all the different modes and scales that contain those notes. And then for example, if I swap out the F to an F sharp, you can see that just by changing one note in the scale, we have a whole new set of scales, in this case, the modes of the G major scale. So let me now talk about my song that I featured in my last video, just because it has a lot of different key changes. So I'll show you kind of an example of how to apply this in practice. I'll put a link in the description, so check it out on Spotify or on my YouTube video where I play the song at the end. So that'll give you a good reference for what I'm going to be talking about here. All right, so primarily the song is in E minor, so that's where we start and end. And then we kind of journey through a bunch of different keys in the middle here. All right, so let's start off with the intro. The intro is all in E minor, so we're not transitioning into anything, but we kind of switch between natural and melodic minor. So the chords in the intro are E minor, D, G, A minor. So it's the 1, 7, 3, 4 effectively here. And then we repeat that. But then we end with a B7, which you can see in the E melodic minor below. All right, so that's basically it. The intro is pretty simple. It's the same in the outro, and it's the same in that like solo riff in the middle. So then where things get interesting is in the verse. All right, so the verse starts off with E minor, B, E minor. So we're just doing like a 1-5-1, which is a very typical cadence to kind of anchor things into the root key. It really solidifies that we're in E minor because we're here, the B7, like it really wants to resolve. So we're anchored here. And then quickly we transition to G major, which is the relative major. So again, if you remember, one of the common techniques you can apply to modulate keys is to take the relative minor or relative major, or the parallel minor, parallel major, or the fourth and the fifth. Very broadly speaking, those are kind of general simple ones. So in Pensato here, if I tap this little galaxy button, you can see all the related scales here. So you can see they're alternative minors, but we can look at the common here and you can see that the second one is relative major, which is G major. What's cool is that in Pensato, if you tap on this closely related button all the way at the bottom, it'll show you a list of all the scales that differ by only 1 degree. And then you can see here that all the chords are highlighted blue, which means that all the chords are shared between the two. This is because these two scales, if you look at the notes on the keyboard, are identical. They just start at a different root. And you can think of these as kind of modes of one another. So this means that the transition from E minor to G major is smooth. It's almost flawless. In fact, you can sometimes not even notice where you're going. Depending on the melody and the mood of the song, you might still think that you're in E minor. So you could argue that I haven't changed keys yet, but the way you listen to the song and the way the melodies are presented, it puts a more of a stronger emphasis that it feels like you are changing keys. So again, the verse started with E minor, so E, B. So our 1-5-1, now we're nicely anchored. So we're back home, and now we're transitioning into the relative major. So again, if you remember, one way to smoothly transition is to just play the dominant chord of the key you want to go into. So for G major, that's a D7 or a D major. So that's exactly the chords I played. So the next chords are D and G. So it's la di di da di sha de, ro, di, sa, di, di. Those are the kind of melody in the verse. And now we're in G major, but we're quickly transitioning into B major. So in this case, one way you can think of it is that the B is the dominant of E minor. So transitioning into the key of B is kind of a precursor to getting us back to E minor. So if we repeat, so we have our verse starting in E minor, B, E minor. La, di, do, ra, di, se. And then we go to the G major, the relative major, by playing the dominant of G, which is D. Ra, tie, di, ra, ti, se. And then we go to the B major by playing its dominant, the F sharp. Ra, di, she, di, sa. And now we transition into the key of D major by using the relative or the parallel minor of the key we're in preparation for going to G, which is the key of the chorus. All right, so to repeat that, the key of the chorus is G major, which we have in our list here. But now we're in the key of B. So now you think about, okay, how do I go from the key of B to the key of G, which are kind of unrelated, even though we just did that jump. So one way you can do that is going through its subdominant. So the dominant key or the dominant of G is D. So one way you can do is go to the key of D first before you go to the key of G. Because if you look at our circle of fifth, you can see G and D are very closely related. So you can kind of follow that path here. And that's exactly what I end up doing. So actually, let me just add D here because that's where we're going next. So if you look at D major, you can see that the sixth chord is B minor. All right, so to transition from B major to D major, I just play the minor of the chord we were on. So we're on B. And since D major doesn't have a B, I just play a B minor, which is the parallel minor of B, but it's also the seventh or the sixth of the D major scale. So that'll prepare us to transition into that because it gives us a chord that is common to that scale. So what I do is basically play the 6, 5, 1. So we're in B minor, A, and then D. So now it feels like we resolved to D. In some cases we did. So now we're in D. So it feels like we're in the key of D, but we're actually preparing ourselves to go back in G, which is the main key of the chorus. But thankfully, D, the chord D, is the dominant of G, so it lends very nicely to want to go into G anyways, especially if you keep pedaling and anchoring on it. I'm probably rambling a lot here, so let me kind of replay the verse more quickly so you can get a feel for the key changes. So again, I'm going to play through it and just listen how we're transitioning. We start in E minor, then we go into the G, which is the relative major, then we go into the B, which is kind of like a transitionary chord or scale, and then we go into the D major in preparation for the chorus. Di, di, da, 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 di, da, ra, di, da, di, da. Da, ra, di, di, da, di, di, da, da, di, da, di. That's our like B minor. Da, ra, da, da, di, da. And now we're in D major. But it's actually the dominant. We're preparing to go into G here. So that's our chorus chord. So let's jump into the chorus since we're there. So again, the chorus starts off in G, and this is the most simple progression in the song now. It's literally just the 1-5 in G major. G, D. Very simple, just 1-5, 1-5, 1-5, 1-5. So we're really anchoring. Again, that's a trick to anchor a key. So if you feel like when you change keys, it doesn't really feel like you're sitting in the new key, just like sticking on the root or jumping 1-5, 1-5, 1-5 and really kind of emphasizing it, because the 5 or the dominant really wants to resolve back into 1. So it really gives it a sense of its new home. And that's kind of what's happening here in the chorus. So there's no doubt that we're in G major now. And then we get into this kind of circle parading around after the chorus here. So the key changes or the scale changes. It starts in G, then we go to C major, then D major, then E major, and then finally E minor at the end. And the chords are very simple here. Again, it's just the 5-1, 5-1, 5-1 of the subsequent keys. So let me add all the scales that we're missing here just so we can visualize it here. All right, so here I've listed all the different keys that we need to know about. So again, chorus starts in G, like I said, just the 1-5. And then we go into the C. And the way we transition into C is, since we're on the chord G, and the G is the dominant chord of C major, it's a fairly simple change. That's why transitioning from closely related keys is so simple, because you can literally you jump from the chord you're in straight into the new key. In this case, you might argue that we're still in G major because the C is still in G major, but the way it's presented and the way it kind of cycles 1-5, 1-5, 1-5 by jumping around really makes the key change more obvious. So that sounds like this. That was the first part, and now we go into the C. So that transition there, again, fairly simple. So we're just going G, C. C major, Ra, A, which is the dominant of D major. D major. And then we want to go into E, so we grab the dominant of the E, which is B. So Ra, da, 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 and now we're in E. Immediately, E major is just there for a little bit, and then immediately we go to the parallel minor, E minor, and that's the original key of the song. So we've kind of made full circle, and then we're all the way back. And then we're in E minor, and then we just transition down diatonically in the scale. So E minor, D, C, and then I play this C7, I guess fourth inversion. So C7 over the 7th, over the B flat, which gives us this nice classical feel. And then B, and then that's the dominant of E minor, so we're really kind of anchoring back home. And then we're back to our intro, which was in E minor. So as you can see, we're kind of taking this journey around scales and kind of jumping around, but ultimately we're going back into E minor at the end. And the song is sort of about death and longing and love, and that's why I wanted this kind of weird journey, because it's very uncertain. The emotion is uncertain in the song, and it's very kind of spacey and weird. So I think the transitions help a lot, but then the anchor is E minor, because ultimately it's kind of like a sad song. So there's a bit of joy and weirdness in the middle as you're kind of transitioning, and then you go back and the E minor kind of brings you back into sadness and longing. Thanks for watching. Check out the app in the description. Check out the song in the description. And I'll catch you guys in the next.